The SEC wants 4 automatic playoff bids. The Big Ten, well, 4 more as well. How about the ACC and the Big 12? Well, they're just toss scraps if they're lucky. But one Big 12 athletic director said it best. I guess we're going to war. Welcome to the new age of college football, and it's about to get ugly.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this Locked On College Crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On UCF. Mike Giddens joining me with Christian Rauh, the host of your said shows, respectfully. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We are growing and giving you content every single day like no other. Your team every day. And this is an exact moment right now that we're giving you content. And it might not exactly be about this team that you are listening to on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, but it is definitely about the Big 12 in college football as a whole. Mike, there was some, dare I say, bombshells that just came out with this new expanded college football playoffs that are set to most likely happen in 2026. I feel it's inevitable. I feel we're going to get 16 teams at least in 2026. It's not confirmed for the record, but there's this new format that has been swirling around. And the format has 4 auto bids for the SEC, 4 auto bids for the Big 10, and only 2 for the Big 12 and the ACC. And you talk about having a Power 4 conference, and that doesn't sound like you have an evenly distributed Power 4 auto bids, if you will. Now, I'm not even for auto bids unless you win your conference. I think you should earn the right to be there. I'm going to let you maybe possibly the voice of reason on this show because I'm going to come in hot at this one.
All right.
There's a lot of things that I got to say. And Greg Sankey did a couple things that maybe are getting me to walk off a ledge and be excited for this one. But let's dig into this right off the bat here. SEC is having their meetings this week, and they're talking about the potential of them joining the Big Ten and being okay with this new 4-4, 2-2, 1-3 type of format. And if they do, an athletic director from the Big 12 said if that happens, then they are, quote, ready for war. Just from hearing that portion alone, what do you think about all of this as we prepare for 2026 and beyond?
Well, I want to lead by saying all these commissioners, I get it, right? Everybody's job is to advocate for their conference. It's crazy that we're only 1 year into this new format and they're already talking about changing it. I don't know about you, Christian, but I thought year 1 went pretty well. I thought we got some really exciting games. I thought the best teams won and had a chance at the end of the day. And that's what the system is designed to do, to give everybody a chance. So, we saw Boise State make it. We saw Arizona State come from the back of the pack in the Big 12 and make it. But more importantly, we saw that a lot of teams had a clear path to it. So when, and we're going to get into it and you're going to frame it up for our listeners here in a second. But when you start talking about auto bids, right? Like I think it's clear that if you're going to give auto bids, 12 is not enough, right? It's got to be a bigger playoff if you're going to give auto bids to any conference. And that's just your mind, right? Like right now we know if you're a conference champion of a Power 4 team, you're in. I would say for a long time, the SEC championship has been kind of like a play-in for that conference. In this new format, the winner and the runner-up are definitely in. And then you got a bunch of other teams who have a shot to make it, if they win their games. Looking at the Big 12, man, there was a clear path for more than a handful of teams to make this first playoff. And if you're going to give auto qualifiers, if we're going to look at the Power 4 all the same, Scott Frost just came back, man, and they're already trying to change the system on this guy. But like, if you're going to give automatic qualifiers to certain conferences, I think it should be even across the board. But then, again, 12 is not enough. 12 is not enough. If we're going past conference champions and you're guaranteeing this conference gets X amount in, is that really what we want? Do we want a 16, a 20 team playoff? I'm not sure that's what the coaches want. They think that the season is enough as it is already. I've talked to a few college coaches that say they don't even like the double bye, let alone a 20-team playoff potentially. So
yeah,
yeah.
I think we're heading to 20 teams eventually. I mean, we're going to get to that portion. I mean, Matt Rule said, 40 at one point. I don't know if I want to get that far, but I mean, we're probably most likely at the minimum looking at 16 teams in 2026. I think that's just where we're at. I know this is a Big 12 believer show, Mike, but there was an ACC coach, Pat Narduzzi from Pitt. He said earlier this month when talking about this entire auto bid kind of status, and he said, I think you should earn your way into any playoff. It comes down to the image of the Big Ten and SEC. There's a lack of respect for the ACC, and then I'll just add in Big 12 as well, since they're mixed in with that. He doesn't like it. That's what he said. Here's my problem with the entire auto bid process, and this is why I don't like it, whether it's 4 or 2 for whatever conference. When you're talking about the 4 power conferences, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, when you're talking about them, if you're giving more than one automatic bid, what does that do to your conference championship game? It basically makes it not that important. Now, I know there's this conversation about potentially doing these play-in games, but then what's the reason to have the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship? What is the reason for it? It sounds like there's no reason to give your all. It's almost like being in a bowl game before the college football playoffs, and you might even see opt-outs. Like, you might even see people not taking that game seriously and act just like another regular season game.
Well, welcome to pro sports, right? Isn't that what we see in the NFL? If you secured a spot, those last few games don't really mean a whole lot. And that's what it's tantamount to. It's tantamount to week 17 of the NFL season. And
they don't give trophies out for winning in week 17, though. They gave a trophy out for winning the Big 12.
That's true. But is that the trophy you want? The trophy they want, right, is that national championship trophy at the end. I had the question about whether we would see teams who knew they were in the playoff essentially just take it easy to stay healthy at the end of the season, or, I don't think we've gotten there yet. But if we continue down this path, they should be prepared for creating that monster, where now it's roster management at the end of the season if we know that we've already secured a playoff. So I think it's in the best interest of college football to keep those teams in doubt playing through the last game, right? You have to believe that there's a chance that you're not going to make it, or you're going to take that time off. Now, like I said, for so long in certain conferences, we know, like if you're the Big Ten right now, your champion and your runner-up are in with 99% certainty they're in. And now that we've eliminated divisions in leagues like the SEC, with the elimination of divisions in these conferences, you will no longer see like a 12-1 versus an 11-1 versus an 8-4 team in a conference championship. That's not going to happen anymore, right? So you don't have to worry about your conference champion being somebody with an 8-win record because they were in the weak division that year and happened to win it, right? It's going to be the 2 best teams straight up. It's by record now. They're ranked by record. So this is a very fascinating conversation to me. I hadn't imagined that we would land here by week, in the second year, going into the second year of this. But look, at the end of the day, the Big 12 had an opportunity to get multiple teams into the college football playoff. And I would not advocate for any format that does not continue to give teams like UCF and Kansas State an opportunity to make the college football playoff. I don't see it. In reality, Christian, I think that 3, maybe even 4 teams from the Big 12 should have that opportunity, depending on how the schedule fleshes out and who's good that year. You understand, some years you're going to have an off year, or maybe your top teams are playing each other and it's elimination. You're eliminating each other, essentially. Like you devour each other. But that wouldn't have been the case this year if certain teams had just held up their end of the bargain and not lost games that they were supposed to lose. So look, man, the things that come out of Greg Sankey's mouth, you have to understand. This is somebody I've spoken to directly a bunch this spring. He's always going to advocate for his conference, and I get it. But I don't think anybody should be delusioned in thinking that Greg Sankey is advocating for what's fair. I would argue none of these conference commissioners care about what's fair. They care what's good for their conference, and they're going to advocate for their conference. And Greg Sankey is going to throw his weight around, but that's when the other conferences have to push back and say, look, it can't be all SEC all the time. We have to have an equitable distribution of the opportunity to make the playoff and win the whole thing.
Sankey might be advocating for his conference, but he might also be advocating for his job as well. Let's continue this conversation right after the break on this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On UCF. But before we do so, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot, breakout player, Indiana, New York Knicks, Oklahoma City Thunder. It's been a really fun Eastern and Western Conference Finals. It really has. I've really enjoyed watching them so far. I don't know about you, Mike, but I certainly have. And FanDuel makes it even more exciting to get in and stay in the game. Before tip-off or live, doesn't matter. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Those Knicks, Indiana Pacers same-game parlays just feel dirty, by the way. When you're adding like a Knicks and a Pacers player together and hoping they do well, it just doesn't seem right. And I'm not even part of that rivalry, but it just doesn't seem right when you're doing it in the SGPs. Fans have way more ways than ever to play and win big. So check out FanDuel for the current playoff odds, playoff props, all that good stuff. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, a $200 bucks in bonus bets will hit your account. How about that? How could you not love that? Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NBA. All right,
Christian,
we're talking
for our listeners real quick. Find the Tyrese Halliburton prop on FanDuel and just hit the over. Doesn't matter what it is. Right now, He's on. I don't know if you've been watching my guy Tyrese, but he's been killing it, and I love it every day. Right, that's what I've been on FanDuel.
Big 12 player, and I know it's Iowa State. I know this Kansas State fan probably shouldn't say it, but he is. He's certainly been on one for sure. We're talking, this a big college football wide conversation here on this special Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State, Locked On UCF, discussing about this new college football playoffs that are set to happen, the changes that are already happening after only being a year in the new 12-team playoff. And before we left you. Before the break, I talked about Greg Sankey and how he is advocating for his conference. That's what you said, Mike. And all these commissioners will always advocate for their conference. Well, it also seems like Greg Sankey may be advocating for his job. He talks about with this new format, the 4-4-2-2, 1-3, if you will. And he says that there also are some other formats that were brought up by the Big 12 and the ACC. And they said that they didn't have much traction because some of those bids added more love to the ACC and Big 12. And of course, the SEC and Big 10 aren't going to like that when you're leading the way. You have the power, you have the ability to say no because you have the media deals of ESPN in your back pocket. I understand it. But Greg Sankey said the displacement of SEC teams would loom as such a big issue if those models were accepted, that he'd likely lose his job. Here's a two-part question for you. If the SEC couldn't get to the 4-team auto bids, are you worried about potentially, if you're Greg Sankey, of actually losing your job after what you have done as an athletic director of the SEC? Look what basketball did this past year, what football did this year. You can even bring up baseball right now. The SEC might be the craziest it's ever been, and you can thank ESPN for a lot of that. I'm paying attention. But here's the other question of it. Talk about job security. What does this mean if Brent Yormark can only secure 2 auto bids for the Big 12?
I think it's a little bit of hyperbole there by Mr. Sankey. I'm going to lose my job. He's not losing his job. But what he is trying to say is that what his coaches and presidents expect of him is to go out and secure a deal that is lopsided in the SEC's favor. I mentioned in our last segment, that's every coach's, commissioner's job. Now, for Brett Yormark, like if he can only get 2 for the Big 12, first of all, I may be in the minority, but I think 2 auto bids for the Big 12 would be a win. I think that you could argue that just because they have 2, it doesn't mean that those are the only 2 opportunities they're going to have to get teams into the playoff. As I mentioned, there were multiple teams that had an opportunity to make the playoff. Arizona State obviously made it, right? But their path wasn't as clear as Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, right? Kansas State this year coming into the season, add Texas Tech to that list of teams that I think has a clear path to the college football playoff. And so you just want to make sure that the opportunity is there. What Greg Sankey saw this past year is that despite the perception of dominance by his conference, he had some of his trademark teams not hold up their end of the bargain. Alabama had a clear path. They won 9 games. They didn't make it. Right? Ole Miss had a clear path and an easy schedule. They won 9 games and they didn't make it, Christian. Missouri, it should have been in. They had a clear path. They won 9 games. They didn't make it. And so he's thinking, if my teams are going to do this to me, I need to work harder to make sure that I set a lower floor for them than 10. Because in his mind, I think he thought at least 4 teams were going to be 10-win teams and that those teams would be in. They ended up getting Georgia and Texas in, and good for them. If you're Brett Yormark right now, is your league accomplished enough that you could try to set the same floor for them without an expanded playoff? Right now, I think the answer is no. But if you're going to go that route, if I were Yormark, what I would be advocating for is equality across the board. If you're going to guarantee yourself 4, we are as much a Power 4 conference as you are, so we all get 4. And you expand to 20, and then you call it a day. Right? I don't think that Sankey cares that other teams get as many as he gets. I think that he wants as many as he can get in because he believes once his teams get there that history has shown that they perform more often than not and that they'll have their chance. Now, it may be a little lopsided in their favor in terms of seeding and buys and you understand, and home field advantage or whatnot. We're going to see them create, I think, some other advantages for the Big Ten and the SEC. But when you look at the Big 12, if you're Brett Yormark, you need to be focused primarily on making sure that you get 2 automatic qualifiers. And if they push for 4, you push for 4, and you push for an expanded playoff. I think that's most likely to be accepted.
Well, if you're talking about evening the playing field, and you want to talk about Sankey lowering the floor, I mean, one thing he could do is continue to keep the SEC at 8 conference games, something that the Big 12 does not do. The Big 12 has 9 conference games. And if you're talking about the conference eating each other up like the Big 12 did last season, if you're Brett Yormark, if the SEC doesn't want to move up to 9, potentially should you follow suit and make the Big 12 go to 8 conference games, schedule another cupcake, and find yourself with another win on your schedule to be more competitive for those at-large bids if you're only getting 2 in the race for an automatic qualifier.
Here's where that hurts them, right? And this is what I think the ESPN kind of bias toward the SEC that the Big 12 does not have is that if you go down to 8 conference games and you schedule another cupcake in place of that conference game, it's going to be held against you. He's got years of data to say that it never gets held against the SEC at the end of the day, right? 8 conference games and that preseason bias that we see. This is why, Christian, ask yourself why the College Football Playoff Committee doesn't start voting until after week 8 or whatever. Right? It's to avoid that preseason bias, to take all that data and then start ranking after you have enough of a sample size to say who's ranks where. But if you're going to do it that way, it's going to only hurt the Big 12, because what's going to happen is you have a bunch of SEC teams that are going to be highly regarded at the beginning of the season. So they're going to get more ranked matchups versus each other in their conference than you're going to get in your conference. That's why I think it hurts you if you're the Big 12, right? Like, so what you have to do is you have to find a way to boost the perception of the teams in your conference. You need the Big 12 schools to invest on the level at some point that they are in the SEC. UCF, Andrew Glukov and I from the last Word on Sports talk repeatedly about, and ad nauseum, about how UCF doesn't really have the money, right? When you talk about how they reorganized their collective, what they've done is they've gotten rid of the Kingdom, which is their collective, and they're absorbing it into what they call their competitive success fund in anticipation of this House bill passing, because there's a $20.5 million pot to fill year one. And the only reason you get rid of your collective is that you don't think that you're going to fill that pot. So instead of splitting the money up and having two entities to deal with, right, you put it all into one, and until you get to a point where you need deals above and beyond what you can control directly from that fund, you don't need a collective. Well, guess what, man? In the SEC, they're snapping their fingers and they're filling that pot, which means they're going to have more options in terms of players. They're going to provide all these lucrative deals. You need the Big 12 programs to invest on the level of these other conferences at some point as well, too. So BYU, man, I mean, one of the things that has I always taken back by the commitment by BYU's fans, their institution, man, listen, they got old money at BYU. Texas Tech, what they're doing, revolutionary for the Big 12, right? They said, look, I mean, they got a billionaire that came out and just said, hey, look, man, I'm going to put tens of millions into this thing to catch them up. That's the energy we need in the Big 12 right now, because once you see that investment, I think you see the level of football come up on average to what you're seeing in the Big 10 and the SEC. And you can make that argument to say, look, man, our commitment to this thing is just as high as theirs, which is why we deserve the same amount of spots.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's dig into some of these Big 12 teams and the fact that we're talking right now at this new college football playoffs. A lot of this is for 2026, but there's some new changes for the 2025 college football playoffs. Yep. And can the Big 12 get more than one team, more than just Arizona State, in the playoffs this upcoming season? Let's talk about that as we wrap up this college crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On UCF. Christian Rauh, Mike Giddens here for this college crossover of Kansas State and UCF, your team every day, always locked on and ready to go. And we are talking an interesting kind of conversation here with Greg Sankey, who we didn't even really talk about at the beginning, but I mean, he went out on a tangent on social media and had a portion in his media days saying that he doesn't need the lectures from others, the good of the game, if you will. Talked about some coordinated press releases between the Big 12 and the ACC. He kind of got called on his bluff there. So that's why if you see over on the side of the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, I call him college football's big fat liar. Just for the record, that's me saying that. Mike, I know you didn't. I created that graphic, buddy. So go ahead. I'll let you know and throw that one out there. I'll take the full credit for that one. But let's talk to Big 12, actually. I'm kind of sick of talking Greg Sankey today. And although he has a lot of things that have really are going to change the landscape, and it sounds like he has the ability to do so, and that's the unfortunate part of all of this. You mentioned the Big 12 has to find a way to be explosive, spend money, all those good things. Old money, new money, doesn't matter. Just has to be some sort of things. You mentioned before we went to the break, BYU and Texas Tech, and I think those are two of the teams that could be some of those big spenders right off the bat. Let's start with Texas Tech first, obviously spending a crap ton of money. You see them in the transfer portal rankings being towards the top in the country, if not the top, because they spent some of the most. Is it one of those kind of concepts, though, where they spent on talent, but it could be potentially, I don't know, Deion Sanders year one, where they did all this changes, brought all these players in, and it wasn't as successful as you would hope right away? Or is this a true Big 12 contender right away with McGuire at the helm?
I think they're a contender. I think they're a contender right away. And look, it's really early for rankings, but any team that's being projected, I think,
it's never too
20,
early. Okay, go ahead.
I like where Texas Tech is at. Now, obviously, it's got to come together. The coaches have to bring it all together. But I think they showed a serious commitment to wanting to compete this offseason with the money that they spend in the portal. And Texas Tech right now in ESPN's way too early top 25. They're ranked 16. And let me tell you, they're not the highest rated Big 12 team. As a matter of fact, there are 3 other teams rated ahead of them, and they're way too early top 25. I like where they're at right now. I think they're right where they should be. You're right there on the fringe. It will, if they win 10 games, they're in. I think a 10-win Texas Tech team is in the college football playoff this year.
There's a lot of things to really just be excited about with this college football playoffs and the Big 12 just in general. But the biggest thing is, can we get 2 Big 12 teams in? Obviously, Arizona State went from the bottom of the Big 12 media rankings up to the very tippy top and found themselves, really 1 play away from beating Texas in the second round of the college football playoffs. Can we get the 2 teams this year with no automatic qualifiers, with just the conference winner? Although we are now seeing straight seeding, so we might not get a bye with this new rankings. You might find themselves out of the top 4. But can we get 2 Big 12 teams in this year? Do you see that being possible, the way that the league likes to eat itself from the inside out?
Yeah, look, again, BYU is in the driver's seat. They are in the driver's seat for that first spot in my book. I think
even with the quarterback issues.
Yeah, I do. I think they're in the driver's seat. They're the highest regarded team right now in a lot of the preseason rankings that you're looking at, as high as 10. So if you're going to start in the top 10, you're in the driver's seat. Perception of that team, if they start their season the way that I think they will, when that first college football playoff ranking comes out, they're going to be right there in the mix. Arizona State riding out high from a Big 12 championship last year. And Christian, it was the most exciting college football playoff, Texas versus Arizona State, a game last year, Texas versus Arizona State. They come in at 12. You've got Iowa State there, right, again in the mix at 14. I mentioned Texas Tech at 16, Kansas State at 18. Yes, the answer is unequivocally yes. The path is very clear for all the teams that I just named to make the college football playoff this year. So you've got to find your way to 10 wins. Find your way to 10 wins. That's the mark, I think, across the board for a lot of these conferences. It held true in the SEC, right? And the reason why I'm saying 10 wins is because if Alabama can win 9 and not get a Bama bump, right? If Missouri and Ole Miss can have the pass that they had with the coaches that they have and not get that bump at 9 wins, South Carolina went on a crazy run at the end of last year, ended up at 9, got left out. I think that a Big 12 team with 10 wins is going to be in this thing. So I think that you have at least 3 spots that you can claim if those teams hold up the end of the bargain and they don't cannibalize themselves at the end of the season. So it's going to be fun to watch. UCF's last game is BYU. If you're BYU, you cannot afford a loss to UCF in your last game. You can't. Not this year. Now, maybe UCF surprises and they're a little better than some people expect them. Sometimes that jolt from a first-year head coach where he comes in and kind of surprises everybody. My sources are telling me they're cooking up something that a lot of Big 12 teams defensively may not be ready for UCF on offense. So, it may take, teams in the Big 12 a little time to adjust to what they're going to see on tape from UCF. But I like where the conference is at. I think they had a good path last year. I think they have a great path this year. And, they've got some great teams. We saw some really great football in the Big 12 last year. Jake Retzlaff was probably one of my favorite players to follow last year, at quarterback. I think that this is a premier conference. I do. I think what Deion has done at Colorado is exciting. It's exciting for the Big 12. It's exciting for college football, and look, man, make no mistake about it. The NCAA wanted Colorado in that playoff. They wanted them in, man. Listen, they wanted that storyline in this playoff. So you're not telling me they got left out because of SEC bias. They got left out because they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, man. And I think it's going to be the same this year. I think they want Deion. They want that around. You know how much money that would have generated, for all those, for the playoffs, for those games, man. It would have been box office. So the Big 12 is just as box office, I think, in a lot of ways. You just have to sustain it. It has to be consistent. So why Kenny Dillingham, after he won and they got put out, he said, look, man, give me some money and I can keep this thing going. He understands it. You can't catch lightning in a bottle every year. You need consistent investment into your program year after year, and you can compete.
I love it. There's a lot to talk about still this offseason. I love the idea of 3 Big 12 teams. I haven't even thought about that. I was hoping for 2, but hey, 3, I'll take it. I'll take it. And if you heard it, if it happens, you heard it from Mike Giddens first, right here on this Locked On College crossover of Kansas State and UCF. If you haven't already, click subscribe. As I mentioned, we are bringing you content every single day, like no other, your team every day. So please like the video, please subscribe. And this has been a Locked On College crossover of Locked On UCF and Locked On Kansas State.